Hey everybody, welcome back to Full Circle with Joyce. And right now we're ready to jump into our next discussion for the day. And we're going to be looking at events of the week in brief. Here with me is Susan Ngonga, who's the managing director of E Plus. Karibu sana to the show.
Thank you,
It's good to
Joyce.
have you here. I was just reflecting on how busy you guys must be. Of course, E Plus has I think the largest network of ambulances in the country, and they work closely with the Red Cross and government. So it's good to have your time. We do
Thank you.
appreciate you. All right, so we want to look at some of the things that have been happening in the country and across the world over the last week. Here in Kenya, coronavirus. The cases rather of coronavirus infections has risen after more people have tested positive. At this rate now, what would you say we should be doing at this point? What more should be done right now?
Thank you, Joyce. As you say, it is indeed true that the cases are rising. By the day we started from one case on the 14th of March, and today we are at 31. And we expect this number to continue rising. We still have a number of people in isolation. The government and the Ministry of Health have given guidelines to Kenyans on what to do to mitigate the increase in transmission. But we can see that this is not being observed. And you know, what I can tell Kenyans is that if we only practice these basic guidelines, it will do a lot to help mitigate the spread. If people stayed at home and to let the medical personnel do their work, that would be one way. If we observe the restrictions for quarantine that have now been made mandatory, that will also help. Isolation for those who are exhibiting some of these symptoms is also encouraged.
Okay.
Simple things like hand washing with soap and just washing your hands in the right way is important.
Do you think the new quarantine timings of 7 p.m. to 5 a.m. Will those actually have an impact? A lot of people seem to be really questioning whether that will have significant impact, considering during the day we're in each other's houses and doing whatever it is people are doing, they're moving around. Do you anticipate that that would have a significant impact in reducing the spread?
I believe it will have to some extent. Because a curfew, you see, if you walk out during the night, there are lots of people still going out and about their business. They're going to the pubs, they're going to restaurants, they're not keeping the social distance. So there are small measures, small steps that, if we are there to them, it will make a difference.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Let's talk about there's a case in Eldoret where a mentally ill man stole an ambulance at Moi Referral Hospital in Eldoret. The man is said to have smashed it against a fuel tanker. He was later arrested on Tuesday morning and taken to Marura Police Post. The suspect is said to have sustained minor injuries, whereas the driver of the tanker did escape unharmed. A very scary story this was. I mean, smashing it against a tanker. Obviously, the man was struggling with some mental health issues. But still speaking then of an ambulance, right? And E Plus, of course, once again, with the largest network of ambulances here in the country. What sort of measures are you guys taking to safeguard yourselves, even as you go about working towards helping reduce the spread?
Indeed, Joyce, that story was quite unfortunate. And of course, the man is mentally ill, so you can say he was not in his right senses when he was doing that. But for ambulance operators and the crew that are dealing with patients on ambulances, there are clear guidelines and trainings that they undertake. And they should not panic when they have a patient on board, because this is not something that they're doing once. They do it every day.
Right.
So they've perfected the art. and their basic defensive driving guidelines and trainings that has been done to them.
Okay.
And even at the point of delivering and handing over a patient to the hospital, because this patient is in an ambulance, and especially our ambulances, which are equipped to the level of basic life support and advanced cardiac life support,
Okay.
which has all the life-saving equipment in them and the professional crew that are attending to the patient.
Right.
At the point of handover, there is no hurry because this patient has been receiving care on transit.
Okay.
So it's just a matter of now you've reached the hospital, you follow now the handover procedures. So the ambulance operator also knows when I reach, this is where I need to dock, I need to switch off the ignition. I
Take
need
out the key.
the key.
Yeah.
I must keep it safely because anything can happen.
Right.
Sometimes he's human. He might just forget not to step on the brake and he's out. The ambulance can move. So those are basic things they need to do, because the moment he does that, then he goes to the back of the patient compartment to help his colleague to remove the patient to hand them over to hospital. So it's quite unfortunate. It might be a time for panic for many ambulance drivers who may not have the sufficient training.
Sure.
But we just call for them to be calm and to observe basic guidelines to
Right.
avert such kind of crisis. That was quite unfortunate.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yes.
And perhaps maybe, I don't know what the exact details were, but it seems like maybe if the key wasn't left, maybe this would have been a different
Should be a
story.
different
but
story, yes.
hopefully, certainly lessons have been learned there. And thank God,
Yeah.
right? People are safe. A fuel tanker, I mean, that could have been a
It would
disaster.
have been a disaster.
On a whole different level.
Yes.
But still speaking then on E+ and the ambulances, to what extent are you guys involved with this? Is it that, so if someone is at home, have been told to stay home, and unless your symptoms really, really develop negatively, then, go to hospital or call for help? Do they call you? Do they call E+? Or to what extent is your work now taking form during this time?
So E+ main business is pre-hospital care and ambulance services, and even before COVID we've been doing this. Yeah. And when COVID-19 came, before even the first case was discovered in Kenya, as E+ we were a bit proactive, and we decided first to prepare our staff from February by building their capacity through trainings, equipping them with the right PPE material.
What's PPE?
Personal protective
Equipment?
Yeah.
Okay.
Gear that they wear to protect them from infections. And just apart from equipping them with this equipment, also training them. Yeah, because it's one thing to have it and one thing not to know how to use it. Yeah, to make them to have the confidence that in the event that we receive such a call, they would be able to confidently handle. Right. We also invested in disinfection and decontamination services for our ambulances. As you know, COVID-19 is infectious, and once you've been in contact with a person, you're required to do the necessary precautions on health and safety to avoid transmission and contamination.
Okay.
So we did this quite early in advance, in February, training the team, equipping them, and preparing our ambulances to be ready to respond.
Understood.
And we are working closely with the Ministry of Health, who is in the forefront in coordinating this response.
Okay.
And through the coordination mechanism, the calls come to us through the Ministry of Health,
Okay.
to our dispatch center, or sometimes we even get calls direct and we coordinate them with the Ministry of Health, and the Ministry of Health have a rapid response team.
Okay.
That goes in advance, and in that way we are working together.
All
And
right.
apart from that, we continue with our normal business. We have designated ambulances dealing with the COVID-19, and we have our other ambulances that are carrying on with our normal business because we still have clients.
Right.
Yeah.
And they don't need to worry about, that cross-contamination.
They don't need
obviously.
to worry about that.
All right.
Yes.
All right. Well, let's move on to stories actually across counties now into Siaya. Of course, there was panic there as a priest who conducted mass tested positive. It is said that he had come from Rome, Italy, on March 11th and then proceeded to Ugunga for a funeral. He conducted the mass and served residents with sacrament. We just had a man of God in studio, and maybe I should have asked this question to him. I'll ask it to the one on Monday, but what was he thinking? I mean, obviously a very sad situation here as well.
Yeah.
And putting so many other people at risk.
Yes.
And I guess this is just going back to what you're saying.
Yes.
As long as we maintain that self-discipline, it is possible for us to stay this disease.
True. Very true. And even for the story of Sia, of course, we've read the stories. The other day I had his interview on TV, on radio, I think, and he has his own version.
Yes, we heard.
Yeah, yeah. I think for us Kenyans also, it's a very difficult time for every Kenyan. It's very traumatic. And really whatever information that we put there, it's important that we put what is true to avoid scaring Kenyans.
Absolutely.
Because families are going through difficult mental times. This is not a normal, situation like any other that we can make fun of.
Yeah.
Yeah, but people are really encouraged to be responsible and to just do the right thing.
Right.
Yes.
Even in Naivasha, 22 hotel staff were quarantined after French tourists spent the night at their premises on March 10th. By March 10th, the first case in Kenya was reported on 14th.
On the Friday 13th.
13th.
Yeah.
Okay, so I mean, technically, I guess they wouldn't necessarily have known, but hopefully now a lot of hotels are certainly taking a lot of precautions. I know several of them have even decided to close down their operations during this time. But some good news, at least. Italy is reporting its biggest daily jump in the death toll, which is good. Of course, Italy has been hit tremendously by coronavirus. It's had the highest number of coronavirus deaths in the world, surpassing China. And the death toll rose from 743 in one day to 6,820 in a day. I mean, that's over 6,000 cases of death in a day. The US now has the third highest number of confirmed cases globally, behind China and Italy, as the WHO warns that it could be the next epicenter. Looking at Italy, did they just not handle this thing well? I think a lot of us are really wondering, how did it escalate to this point? And that is part of our concern as Kenyans too, that are we making sure that we also don't end up in the same boat?
Indeed, yeah. We have lots of lessons to learn from Italy. And that's why as Kenyans, we are saying we don't want to get to that level. And in all these cases, we're just learning from experience from different countries, and taking the positive lessons into our country is what is important for us now and critical.
Right.
So as Kenya, we don't want to get to that level of Italy. And from some of the things that we are reading, we see that Italy did not take the precautions, the basic guidelines in the beginning. Until now, they had to force. Yeah. So I must say we may be fortunate to some extent now that, we have 31 cases. We don't have, we recorded one death yesterday, unfortunately, and my condolences to the family. But we can avert getting to that case of Italy by just making sure that we observe these guidelines.
Right.
Yes.
Right. They're there for a reason.
They're there
and
for
it's
a
like
reason.
how we talk about experience. You don't always have to make mistakes on your own.
Yes.
Learn from somebody else's mistakes.
Yes.
Very, very important.
Yes.
Okay. In Zimbabwe, a journalist did die from COVID-19. He was said to be the first person in the country to die from the virus. And he contracted the virus while in New York State and was in Wilkins Hospital in Harare. And of course, a lot of the cases, including the ones here in Kenya, are from international travel, right? Like prior to us knowing about this on the 13th, we were okay.
Yeah. We didn't expect it to be here.
We didn't expect it to be here. So
Yes.
huku majuu.
Yes.
I mean, all puns intended, but huku majuu, sio kuzuri saa yote, right?
Yes.
And I think there's also a sense for us to really appreciate what we have here in Kenya.
Yes.
But certainly many of us concerned about, especially in the informal areas and informal settlements, how people are living, how they are managing. And I guess one of the questions then related to this, because South Africa, Uganda, and South Sudan have gone on full lockdown. Is that something Kenya should be doing right now? There's been, conversations on Twitter. This has been trending. Should we be on lockdown?
Really, Joyce, we know Kenya, and we know that a lockdown in Kenya would have negative effect on our economy. Most Kenyans live on hand to mouth, yeah? But if that is what has to be done with corrective measures and proper directives put in place, then it is the best thing for us to do to mitigate the further risk of transmission or people getting into contact with this disease.
Yeah.
We would not like to be there, but if it has to be done, it has to be done for the benefit of the bigger population of the country.
But do you think as a country we are actually able to handle that? And maybe there's part of the question too is, how long of a lockdown should we have? I've heard people talking about 2 weeks, other ones talking about 21 days. Does the duration of the lockdown matter? Because one of the biggest questions is, how are we going to feed people, especially those in Mashinani who, as you're saying, live hand to mouth, and every day is about finding dinner or finding something to eat. Do we have provisions, as a country to be able to maybe send food in? When we were talking about hand washing, a lot of people were here saying that's for people in Runda and in I don't know, Karen, because they're the ones who have running water. We don't have running water. How are we supposed to do that? What are some of the measures that we could take? Is this time really for the private sector to maybe step in, partner with government in this way? Or how do you envision us being able to manage this?
Yeah, it really calls for collective action and, people coming together to put their heads together to think. Partnership, multi-stakeholder engagement is very important to address these issues, because the realities are just as you say them.
Yeah.
And we cannot work alone. We need the private sector, we need the government, we need all the think tanks to come together to see how we can do this to just ensure that we're in the right track, and we are also able to deal with the concerns that our people have, and just do the best for everyone. Yes. Yeah.
In fact, speaking of people coming together and making this a collective effort, there's some conversations that have been happening on Twitter. Dangote in Nigeria has donated 200 million naira to fight coronavirus in Nigeria. The Aliko Dangote Foundation earmarked 124 million to support facilities to help prevent, assess, and respond to health events at point of entry and ensure national safety. All right. And a lot of people are just commenting on this, saying, how comes us, our Kenyan billionaires, are not doing the same thing? Why aren't they stepping up to help this situation? In fact, yesterday I read one saying how ours, they are quiet at the moment, but later on now will come up and still be talking about how to make it to the top. But maybe this is an opportunity to challenge, I think, based on what you're saying, that it is high time then that we see guys step up. I think the government, to be fair, is overwhelmed.
Yes.
We're very stretched at this point. We had other financial commitments going on. I don't know if you would add your voice to that call for for people to jump in and help out with this, but
I think this is a new thing for all of us.
Sure.
We've never been in this situation.
Yeah.
And I want to believe the government is doing the best that it can under the circumstances.
Yeah.
And we just need to rally behind the government and support with whatever ideas that we can, because every day people wake up with the new ideas, new thinking. Yeah, it would have been different if it's something that had happened before.
Yeah.
So then we can pick up from some of the lessons we learned.
Yeah.
But this one, it is on our face that we really just have to think now and get it right. Yeah.
Absolutely,
Yes.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Susan, for coming on to the show. It's been great talking to you, just going over some of the things that have been happening in our country, in Africa and the world this week. All the best as you continue working towards this, towards its management and hopefully eradication at some point. We do appreciate your time.
Thank you,
and
Joyce.
guys, you can continue to send in your feedback and your comments on what we've been talking about, including this last topic about should our billionaires be stepping up to do something about coronavirus here in Kenya, right? Should they, I know the president and the deputy president have said that they're going to take salary cuts. How do you guys feel about that? Is that sufficient? Or what would you be proposing at this time? 22999 is the SMS line. Also on Facebook at Switch TV Kenya. We're going to take a short break now as we get ready for the second hour of our show. Coming up next, Robert Burale will be joining me in studio to talk about men and how they can handle anxiety when everything is changing. That's our man cave discussion coming up. And we're going to be wrapping up later on with a praise and worship segment with Bishop Simon Kariuki and In His Presence Church here in studio. So stay tuned. I'll see you at the top of the hour.